I'm Samantha Hayes, 32 years old, standing in my luxurious penthouse office, overlooking Seattle's skyline on Christmas Eve. Exactly 10 years ago, I was thrown out of my family home with just a backpack and $200 to my name. I can still hear my father's cold words. If you're too good for this family's business, you're too good for this family. 10 years ago, my father threw me out on Christmas Eve with nothing. Today, as CEO of a $68 million tech company, I received his first message in a decade begging for help. Before I dive into my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. If you've ever had to rebuild your life from scratch or deal with family who didn't believe in you, hit that like button and subscribe. Trust me, what happened after I got that message will shock you. 10 years ago, life looked completely different. I was 22 and had just finished my fall semester at community college in our small Ohio town of Millfield. My family wasn't wealthy, but we got by. My father Richard ran Hayes Hardware, a struggling store that had been in our family for 3 generations. My mother Diane worked the register, my older brother Scott handled inventory, and my younger sister Heather, still in high school, helped on weekends. While the rest of the family poured everything into the hardware store, I had discovered a different passion: computers. Since my sophomore year of high school, I'd been building websites for local businesses. The local bakery, the flower shop, even Dr. Anderson's dental practice. I'd designed simple sites for them all, teaching myself coding late into the night after finishing my shifts at the store. My parents viewed my computer hobby as a distraction. "Websites aren't going to feed you," my father would say. "Real work is done with your hands, not typing on keyboards." Scott, 4 years older and always Dad's favorite, would snicker whenever I tried to explain the potential of e-commerce or digital marketing to modernize our store. "College isn't necessary for running a hardware store," was my father's constant refrain. Had dropped out after a semester and expected us all to follow his path. Scott had, immediately joining the family business after high school. But I wanted more. That December, something amazing happened. I received an acceptance letter from Berkeley's computer science program with a substantial scholarship. Not full ride, but enough to make it possible if I worked part-time and took out minimal loans. It was my ticket out of Millfield, my chance to turn my hobby into a career. I waited until Christmas Eve to share the news, thinking the holiday spirit might soften the blow. Our small house was decorated with the same artificial tree we'd had since I was a child, multicolored lights blinking against the faded wallpaper. The smell of my mother's pot roast filled the air as we gathered around the dining room table. I got into Berkeley, I announced after dinner, pulling out the acceptance letter. "Computer science program. They're giving me a scholarship." The silence that followed was deafening. "California?" My mother finally spoke, her voice small. "That's all the way across the country." "Berkeley?" My father's face darkened, his voice dangerously low. "You applied without telling us?" Scott leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "Always thinking you're better than the rest of us, aren't you, Sammy?" Only 16-year-old Heather seemed genuinely happy for me. "That's amazing, Sam. Isn't that super hard to get into?" "It's ridiculous is what it is," my father interrupted. "We need you here. The store is struggling, and you want to run off to California to play with computers?" "It's not playing, Dad. It's a degree that could." "That could what? Make you too good to work with your hands? Too smart to be part of this family?" His voice was rising now. "We have a legacy here, a business that's fed and housed you your entire life." "A business that's barely staying afloat," I countered, immediately regretting my words. Dad slammed his fist on the table, making the plates jump. "So you think you can do better? Fix everything with your fancy computer degree? That's not what You've always had your head in the clouds, always thought you were smarter than everyone else." "Well, let me tell you something, Samantha. Life isn't about fancy degrees. It's about loyalty. It's about family. This is about my future, Dad. I can help the family better with a degree." "Help the family?" Scott scoffed. "You mean abandon us the first chance you get?" I looked to my mother for support, but she stared down at her plate, saying nothing. My father stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. I'm going to make this very simple for you. Either you commit to this family and this business, or you go chase your California dreams. But if you walk out that door, don't expect to come back. Dad, that's not fair, Heather protested. Stay out of this. He snapped at her before turning back to me. Well, what's it going to be? I stood up slowly, my legs trembling. I can't give up this opportunity. Dad, I just can't. Then get out. The words were ice cold. Richard. My mother finally spoke, but without conviction. It's Christmas Eve. Get out. He pointed to the door. If you're too good for this family's business, you're too good for this family. I ran upstairs, tears streaming down my face, and stuffed what I could into my backpack, some clothes, my laptop, toiletries. When I came downstairs, my mother slipped me $200 while my father wasn't looking. I'm sorry, she whispered, but she didn't stand up to him. She never did. Scott watched with smug satisfaction. This was what had always wanted me gone, all of Dad's attention on him, the dutiful son. Heather hugged me fiercely. I'll call you, she promised, but we both knew Dad would make sure that didn't happen. The last thing I heard as I walked out into the snowy night was my father's voice. You think you're better than us? Go prove it. I trudged through the snow. No car, nowhere to go, on Christmas Eve. Eventually, I made it to Mrs. Wilson's house, my high school computer science teacher. She took me in for the night, helped me make arrangements. But that night, crying on her couch, I made a promise to myself. I would prove my father right. I would become better than anything they could imagine. Not out of spite, but because I had no choice anymore. January in Berkeley hit differently than Ohio winters. The weather was milder, but the cold I felt was deeper, the kind that comes from being completely alone. I arrived at university with everything I owned in a single backpack. 3 changes of clothes, my laptop with a cracked screen, and $157 after bus fare. The scholarship covered most of my tuition, but not housing or food. My first week on campus, I applied for every job I could find. By week 2, I was working 3 jobs. Morning shifts at the campus IT help desk, evening waitressing at a diner near campus, and late nights doing freelance coding work for anyone who would hire me. I slept 4 hours on good nights. Home was a tiny room in the cheapest apartment complex I could find, shared with 3 other students I rarely saw. My diet consisted mainly of ramen noodles and whatever leftovers I could bring home from the diner. Some nights I skipped dinner entirely, putting the saved money toward next semester's books. During those first few months, I tried calling home several times. My calls went straight to voicemail. I sent letters that came back marked return to sender. I emailed my sister's personal account, only to receive a brief response. Dad's monitoring my emails. Can't talk. Sorry. Rachel, my only friend from high school, who still spoke to me, filled me in on the hometown gossip during our occasional calls. They're telling everyone you abandoned the family, she said. Your dad says you chose money and prestige over family loyalty. It stung. Not just the lies, but knowing my parents did nothing to correct them. The turning point came during my sophomore year, when I met Zoe Chen in advanced programming. Brilliant, fearless, and from a family of tech entrepreneurs, Zoe saw something in me I couldn't yet see in myself. You code like someone fighting for her life, she told me after we pulled an all-nighter, finishing a project. Maybe I am, I replied. We became inseparable. When she learned about my situation, she started bringing extra food to our study sessions. Brain fuel, she'd say casually, never making me feel like charity. During junior year, we developed our first app together, a simple tool that helped small businesses manage inventory and online orders simultaneously. Nothing revolutionary, but it worked well and solved a real problem. That little app earned us enough that I could quit the waitressing job. I sent a check to my parents with a note about my small success. The check was cashed, but no acknowledgement came. When I learned through Rachel that my sister was graduating high school, I drove 15 hours in a borrowed car to attend the ceremony. I spotted my parents and brother in the audience, and slipped into the back row. After the ceremony, I approached with a gift for Heather, a laptop for her college studies. My father saw me first, his face hardening. "We don't need your charity," he said, ushering my mother and sister away. Scott stood behind, smirking. "Still trying to show us up, huh, Sammy?" The gift remained in my hands as they walked away, Heather glancing back with tears in her eyes. I graduated with honors, top of my class. Professor Jackson, who had become something of a mentor, brought flowers to the ceremony. "Any family coming?" he asked. I shook my head. After the ceremony, he introduced me to a friend, an angel investor named David Mercer, who was interested in backing promising new tech graduates. "Your senior project has commercial potential," David told me. "Would you be interested in a small investment to develop it further?" That small investment was $50,000 more money than I'd ever seen. Zoe and I had been talking about starting a company together after graduation. This was our chance. Seattle has a growing tech scene, lower cost of living than the Bay Area, and no state income tax, Zoe pointed out as we considered locations. Plus, it's about as far from Ohio as you can get without falling into the Pacific. And so, with degrees in hand and $50,000 in our business account, Seattle welcomed us with a week of continuous rain fitting for the fresh start we were making. Zoe and I rented a one-bedroom apartment in a rundown building south of downtown. We converted the living room into our office, sleeping in shifts on a pull-out sofa bed for the first 3 months until we could afford a second bed. Our company, which we named Shield Tech, focused on developing more advanced versions of the security software from our senior project. We worked 18-hour days, subsisting on instant coffee and microwave burritos. Our business attire consisted of whatever clean clothes we could find, often wrinkled from being dried on radiators. The first year was a series of closed doors. We pitched to 27 investors, 25 rejected us outright. "Your concept is interesting, but you girls lack experience," was a common response. "Have you considered bringing on a more seasoned CEO?" suggested one investor, eyeing Zoe's pink-streaked hair with barely disguised disdain. The other 2 investors offered insultingly low valuations with terms that would have essentially handed over control of our company. "This is bullshit." Zoe fumed after a particularly demoralizing meeting. If we were 2 guys named Sam and Joe instead of Samantha and Zoe, they'd be throwing money at us. She wasn't wrong. But we kept going because we had no choice. I couldn't go back to Ohio with my tail between my legs. Zoe wouldn't give venture capitalists the satisfaction of proving their biases correct. Our breakthrough came through Professor Jackson, who connected us with Liam Walsh, a veteran tech executive who'd recently sold his cybersecurity company. Unlike the others, Liam actually understood what we were building. "You're solving a problem most companies don't even realize they have yet," he said after reviewing our prototype. "That's either terrible timing or brilliant foresight. I'm betting on the latter." Liam invested $500,000 for a 10% stake, a fair valuation that allowed us to rent actual office space and hire our first 3 employees. We named our flagship product Secure Shield, an integrated security platform that protected against data breaches by constantly adapting to new threats. Our first major client was Lake Washington Credit Union, a small financial institution willing to take a chance on us when the big banks wouldn't return our calls. When Secure Shield successfully blocked an attempted hack into the credit union's systems, word spread through the financial community. Within 6 months, we had signed contracts with 12 more credit unions and 2 regional banks. Our team grew to 15 people. I moved out of the shared apartment into a modest 1-bedroom of my own. For the first time since leaving home, I had a real bed, matching furniture, and a refrigerator containing more than condiment packets. Each milestone reminded me of the family that wasn't sharing it with me. I sent birthday cards to my parents and siblings. I mailed Christmas gifts. I called on holidays, always reaching voicemail. Through Rachel, I learned that the family hardware store was struggling worse than ever, losing business to a new Home Depot that had opened in the neighboring town. "Scott's got a gambling problem," Rachel confided during one call. "Everyone knows it, but your dad won't face it. He keeps bailing Scott out, remortgaged the house twice already." I wanted to help, but knew any offer would be rejected as an insult. Instead, I anonymously paid off some of their suppliers, instructing the companies to tell the Hayes family that the balances were forgiven due to long-standing customer loyalty. 3 years after founding ShieldTech, we experienced our defining moment. A major national bank was targeted by a sophisticated cyber attack. Their existing security systems were breached, but our supplemental system, which they'd installed just 2 months earlier as a backup, detected the intrusion and prevented the theft of over $20 million in customer funds. Overnight, we went from promising startup to essential security provider. Our phones didn't stop ringing. Liam helped us navigate the sudden growth, bringing in experienced managers and helping us secure offices that could accommodate our rapidly expanding team. I sent a copy of the regional tech magazine that profiled our success to my parents' address. Like everything else, there was no response, but I kept sending updates not to gloat, but because despite everything, they were still my family, and some stubborn part of me believed that someday they might be proud of what it accomplished. Secure Shield prevents $20M bank heist, read the headline in the Seattle Business Journal. The article detailed how our security system had detected and blocked a sophisticated attack that had breached multiple layers of a national bank's defenses. Within days, my phone was ringing constantly with interview requests and potential clients. ShieldTech's valuation jumped to $30 million almost overnight. We moved into proper offices in a gleaming downtown tower, our company logo displayed prominently in the lobby. Our team expanded to 50 employees, with dedicated departments for development, sales, customer support, and administration. Despite the company's growth and my increasing personal wealth, I maintained relatively modest habits. My splurges were selective. A sleek penthouse apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Puget Sound, a personal assistant to manage my increasingly complex schedule, and generous donations to scholarship funds for tech students from disadvantaged backgrounds. Zoe, on the other hand, embraced success more visibly. Each Christmas, I still sent cards to my family's address in Ohio. Each year, they came back, marked return to sender. I'd created a new tradition for myself, making anonymous donations to causes in my hometown. A new computer lab for the high school, funding for the local library, a contribution to the town's medical center where my father had once been treated for a broken arm. 5 years after founding ShieldTech, we developed a new AI-powered security protocol that could predict and prevent attacks before they occurred. The technology garnered attention from federal agencies, leading to government contracts worth millions. A Series A funding round valued the company at $68 million. National publications began taking notice. Tech Innovator put us on their startups to watch list. Business Week profiled our rapid growth. Then came the cover that changed everything. Forbes featured my photo with the headline, "The Security Genius You've Never Heard of, How Samantha Hayes Built a $68M Empire from Nothing." The magazine made its way to Millfield. Rachel called me immediately. "Your cover is literally everywhere in town," she said. "The convenience store has it by the register. Everyone's talking about it." Within days, I received a Facebook friend request from my cousin Brian, whom I hadn't spoken to in years. His message was simple: "Holy shit, Sam. Is that really you on Forbes?" More messages trickled in from extended family and old acquaintances. Former classmates who'd never given me a second glance suddenly remembered how close we'd been in high school. A teacher wrote to say she always knew I'd do something special, but from my immediate family, nothing. Through my regular checks with Rachel, I learned that my father's health had been declining. The hardware store was weeks away from foreclosure. Scott's gambling had spiraled to the point where he owed money to people who didn't use courts to collect debts. My sister Heather, now with a teaching degree, had returned home to help care for our parents, putting her own life on hold. I made another anonymous donation to the town medical center, specifically directed to cardiac care, after learning my father had suffered a mild heart attack. It was the most I could do for a family that wanted nothing from me except my absence. Or so I thought, until that Christmas Eve, exactly 10 years after it'd been thrown out. I was hosting ShieldTech's holiday party at my penthouse when my phone lit up with a notification I never expected to see. An email from my brother Scott with the subject line, We need to talk. The email from Scott arrived at precisely 8:43 p.m. on Christmas Eve, while I was circulating among Shield Tech employees at our holiday party. My assistant Megan noticed my expression change as I checked my phone. "Everything okay?" she asked. I nodded, excusing myself to read the message in my home office. Scott's email was brief. "Sam, I know it's been a long time. We need to talk. Family situation is critical. Please respond. Scott." No apology. No acknowledgement of 10 years of silence. Just a demand dressed as a request. I closed the email without responding and rejoined the party, but my mind was elsewhere. After the guests left, I poured myself a glass of wine and read the message again. Part of me wanted to delete it and maintain the wall it built between my past and present. Another part, the part that still remembered being that scared 22-year-old, wanted desperately to respond. I waited until after Christmas to discuss it with Dr. Rivera, my therapist of 5 years. "What do you want to do?" she asked after I showed her the message. "I don't know," I admitted. "They threw me away like I was nothing. And now they need something," she observed. "How does that make you feel?" "Vindicated. Angry. Sad." I paused. "Worried, too. Despite everything, they're still my family." 3 days after Scott's email, I received another message, this one from my mother. "Samantha, please call us. Your father is very ill. We need you." Mom. Again, no apology, though her tone was more desperate than Scott's. I showed both messages to Zoe over lunch. "They're using emotional manipulation," she said flatly. "They ignored you for 10 years while you struggled, and now that you're successful and they need help, suddenly you're family again? Screw that." My friend Tara, who'd experienced her own family estrangement, offered a different perspective. "Find out what's going on before you decide. Information doesn't commit you to anything." I decided to take a measured approach. First, I hired a private investigator to assess the situation in Millfield. His report confirmed what Rachel had told me and added concerning details. The hardware store was $273,000 in debt and scheduled for foreclosure on February 1st. My father had suffered 2 heart attacks in the past year and required bypass surgery his insurance wouldn't fully cover. Scott owed $150,000 to a loan shark with connections to organized crime in Cleveland. My sister Heather had given up a promising teaching position in Columbus to return home and care for our parents. My mother had been working double shifts at a local Currence's diner to help with expenses. The day after receiving this report, my phone rang with a number I still recognized despite the decade that had passed my childhood home. I let it go to voicemail. "Samantha." My mother's voice wavered. "I know we don't deserve to hear back from you. What happened? How we let you go? I've regretted it every day. Your father would never admit it, but he has too. Scott's got us in trouble. Your father needs surgery we can't afford. Please call us back. Please." It was the closest thing to an apology I'd heard in 10 years. After another session with Dr. Rivera and long conversations with my closest friends, I made my decision. I would go to Millfield, but on my terms. I wouldn't send money sight unseen. I wouldn't communicate through intermediaries. I would see the situation for myself and decide what, if anything, I was willing to do. I instructed my assistant to clear my schedule for 3 days and had my company jet fueled for the flight to Ohio. I booked the presidential suite at the Millfield Grand Hotel, a new establishment that hadn't existed when I lived there, and arranged for a luxury car rental. If I was returning to face my past, I wouldn't do so as the scared girl they'd thrown out. I would arrive as the woman I'd become successful, confident, and completely independent of their approval. The flight to Ohio gave me time to prepare mentally. I reviewed the dossier on my family's situation again, familiarizing myself with every detail. I rehearsed what I might say, anticipating their excuses and justifications. As the private jet descended toward the small regional airport, I gazed out the window at the snow-covered landscape of my childhood. 10 years had changed me beyond recognition, but Millfield looked exactly the same. The driver met me at the private terminal, helping with my bags and opening the door to a black SUV. As we drove through town toward the hotel, I saw the familiar landmarks of my youth. The high school where Id first discovered my love for programming. The library where Id spent countless hours reading tech journals. The town square where Id launched my first website for the local Chamber of Commerce. We passed Hayes Hardware, its windows now featuring desperate everything must go signs. The building looked shabby, the paint peeling, the displays outdated. Just 2 customers browsed the aisles visible through the front window. A few blocks later, we passed my childhood home. The sight of it sent an unexpected pang through my chest. The house seemed smaller than I remembered, the yard unkempt, the Christmas decorations sparse and lopsided. At the hotel, the staff fell over themselves when they realized who I was. The Forbes cover had made an impression here too. "Miss Hayes, it's an honor to have you staying with us," the manager gushed. "If there's anything at all you need." I settled into the suite, changed into a tailored charcoal suit paired with a deep blue blouse, and made a call to the hospital where my father was recovering from his latest cardiac episode. "I'll be there in 30 minutes, I told my mother, who answered his room phone. The shock in her voice was evident. "You're here? In Millfield?" "Yes," I replied simply. "We have a lot to talk about." I ended the call and took a deep breath, steeling myself for the confrontation ahead. 10 years ago, Id left Millfield with nothing but a backpack and shattered dreams. Now I was returning with the power to save my family from ruin or to let them face the consequences of their choices. The decision was entirely mine. Millfield General Hospital hadn't changed much in 10 years. Same beige walls, same antiseptic smell, same flickering fluorescent lights in the hallways. But I had changed, and the looks I received as I walked confidently through the corridors in my designer suit confirmed it. I found my father's room easily enough. Taking a final deep breath, I pushed open the door. The scene inside hit me harder than Id anticipated. My father, once robust and intimidating, lay propped against pillows, diminished by illness, tubes running from his arms, monitors beeping steadily beside him. My mother, her hair now more gray than brown, sat beside the bed, hands nervously fidgeting in her lap. Heather stood by the window, taller now at 26, but with the same kind eyes. Scott leaned against the wall, his once athletic frame now soft with dissipation, dark circles under his bloodshot eyes. For a moment, no one spoke. Then my mother rose, moving toward me with hesitant steps. "Samantha," she whispered, wrapping her arms around me in an awkward embrace that felt both familiar and foreign. "You came." I returned the hug stiffly, noting the desperation in her grip. When we separated, I could see tears in her eyes, relief mixed with shame. "Hello, Mom," I said, then nodded to each family member in turn. "Dad." "Heather." "Scott." Heather rushed forward, hugging me with genuine warmth. "I've missed you so much," she said, her voice breaking. My father's eyes met mine from the hospital bed. Complex emotions crossed his face, pride, shame, resentment, all fighting for dominance. "Samantha," he finally managed, his voice rougher than I remembered. "You look successful." Scott pushed himself away from the wall, attempting a smile that came across as more of a grimace. Little Sammy, all grown up and famous now. He moved to embrace me, the smell of alcohol barely masked by breath mints. "We always knew you'd make something of yourself." I stepped back, maintaining professional distance. "No, you didn't. But that's not why I'm here." The false warmth in the room evaporated instantly. "You've had health issues," I continued, addressing my father directly. "And financial problems. From what I understand." "We've hit a rough patch," my father admitted reluctantly. "The big box stores, the economy." "Your brother's gambling habits," I added, turning to Scott, whose face flushed red. "You don't know anything about," he started, but my father cut him off. "We're family, Samantha. Despite what happened, we need help. Family." I repeated the word, tasting its bitterness. 10 years without a word. 10 years of returned letters and blocked calls. Now I'm family? My mother began to cry softly. "We made a terrible mistake. Your father was proud, stubborn." "And you?" I asked her directly. You slipped me $200 and let me walk out into a snowstorm on Christmas Eve. She flinched as if I'd slapped her. I've regretted it every day. We all have, my father said, attempting to sit up straighter, wincing with the effort. I was wrong, Samantha. Maybe I was. A bit harsh back then. A bit harsh. The understatement was almost laughable. I kept tabs on you, my mother offered tentatively. Through Mrs. Wilson, I knew you were in college, then starting your business. You knew I was struggling to survive. And you did nothing, I corrected her. You knew I was working 3 jobs to stay in school. You knew I was eating ramen for every meal. You knew, and you chose to do nothing. Dad wouldn't let us contact you, Heather said softly. I was angry, my father admitted. Proud. Stupid. Scott, seemingly impatient with the emotional reconciliation attempt, got to the point. Look, we're in trouble, Sam. Real trouble. The store's going under, Dad needs surgery, and I've got some financial complications. Loan sharks, I said bluntly. You owe $150,000 to people who break kneecaps instead of filing lawsuits. Scott's eyes widened. How did you? I have resources now. I know everything: the remortgaged house, the store's debts, your gambling addiction, Heather giving up her career to come back here. So you'll help us? Scott asked, a note of calculation entering his voice. I've got some great ideas for turning the store around. We could renovate, expand into e-commerce. With your tech background and my business experience. Your business experience? I couldn't help but laugh. You've run our family store into the ground and accumulated gambling debts that put everyone in danger. That's not fair, he snapped, his friendly facade cracking. You abandoned this family when things got tough. Ran off to California to get rich while we struggled. I was thrown out. I shot back. I begged to stay in touch. I sent money when I could. Everything was returned. We didn't need your charity then, Scott said bitterly. We need investment now. There's a difference. So I'm not family when I need support, but I am family when you need my money? I clarified, keeping my voice steady despite the anger rising in my chest. You always thought you were better than us, Scott continued, his voice rising. Now you show up in your fancy suit and private jet, looking down on everyone. Scott, enough, my father interrupted, his monitor beeping faster. Samantha, please. We're not handling this well. We're desperate. The doctors say I need this surgery, but the insurance only covers 60%. The bank's foreclosing next month. And Scott's situation is dangerous for everyone. You've got millions, Scott added. What's a couple $100,000 to someone like you? I looked from face to face, my father's pained expression, my mother's tearful desperation, Scott's barely contained resentment, and Heather's genuine distress. I thought about walking out, leaving them to the consequences of their choices the way they'd left me to face the world alone. Instead, I turned to Heather. Let's get coffee in the cafeteria. I'd like to hear your perspective. She doesn't need a private conversation, Scott interjected. We're all family here. I fixed him with a cold stare. Heather is the only one who ever tried to stay in touch with me. She gets courtesy the rest of you haven't earned. I walked out without waiting for a response, Heather quickly following. As the door closed behind us, I heard Scott's angry voice. She's going to hold this over us forever. You watch. In the elevator, Heather squeezed my hand. Thank you for coming. It's been really hard. Tell me everything, I said as the doors closed. And don't sugarcoat it. I need the truth. The hospital cafeteria was nearly empty at 7 p.m., fluorescent lights buzzing overhead as Heather and I claimed a corner table with our coffees. She looked exhausted, shadows under her eyes telling of sleepless nights and constant worry. Start from the beginning, I said gently. What happened after I left? Heather stared into her coffee. Dad was angry for months. Your name became taboo. Anyone who mentioned you got shut down immediately. Mom cried a lot when she thought no one was looking. And the store? It was already struggling, but things got worse when Home Depot opened in Westville. Dad refused to modernize. No website, no credit card payments until 2018, no inventory management system. Scott took over more responsibilities. But, she trailed off. But he was gambling. I finished for her. She nodded. It started with poker nights, then sports betting, then online casinos. Dad caught him taking money from the register 3 years ago, but instead of consequences, Dad just started working the register himself and gave Scott other duties. And you? You were teaching in Columbus, right? Heather's face brightened momentarily. 4th grade. I loved it. But then Dad had his first heart attack last year, and Mom couldn't manage everything alone. Scott was useless, disappearing for days when bill collectors showed up. So you sacrificed your career, I observed. Family takes care of family, she said, then winced, realizing how that might sound to me. Except when it doesn't, I said quietly. Tears welled in her eyes. I wanted to contact you so many times. I still have all the letters and presents you sent. Dad intercepted them, but I found them in his closet and kept them. This small act of rebellion touched me more than I expected. What about Mom? She said she kept tabs on me through Mrs. Wilson. Heather nodded. Mom would visit her for book club meetings, but really she was getting updates about you. She has a scrapbook hidden in her craft supplies, news clippings, printouts of articles about your company, but she never reached out. I noted. She was scared of Dad. Still is, in many ways. And Scott's financial complications? Heather lowered her voice. He borrowed from some scary people in Cleveland. They've started coming around the house. Last week, one of them sat in our living room for 2 hours, not saying anything, just waiting. Mom was terrified. After our cafeteria conversation, I spent the next day conducting my own investigation. I met with the hospital's financial department regarding my father's medical bills. I reviewed the store's books with the reluctant help of their part-time accountant. I spoke with the bank manager, handling the foreclosure proceedings. The situation was even worse than it imagined. The store hadn't turned a profit in 6 years. My parents had remortgaged their house 3 times to cover both business losses and Scott's gambling debts. My father's heart condition required expensive surgery and ongoing treatment his Medicare supplemental insurance wouldn't fully cover. Most concerning was Scott's debt to a loan shark connected to a Cleveland crime family. A contact in Seattle law enforcement confirmed the organization wasn't known for patience or mercy. I hired a forensic accountant to dig deeper into the family finances. His findings shocked even me. Scott had forged my signature on loan applications 3 years earlier, using old ID documents ID left behind. Head claimed I was a silent partner in the hardware store, using my now-established credit to secure funds he promptly lost at underground poker games. This discovery changed everything. Not only was my family in trouble, but my own financial reputation was potentially compromised. The anger I'd been suppressing threatened to boil over. I arranged a private meeting with my father in his hospital room while Scott was at the store and my mother was at home resting. I need to ask you something, I said, sitting beside his bed. And I need the truth. My father nodded, looking older than his 62 years. Did you know Scott forged my signature on loan documents? His face fell, confirming my suspicion before he spoke. I found out after the fact. He said he'd pay it back before anyone discovered it. That's fraud, Dad. He committed a crime using my identity. Hez my son, he said weakly. Your brother. And Im your daughter, I countered. The one you threw away. We sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, he spoke again, his voice heavy with regret. I made the biggest mistake of my life that night. My damn pride. He looked up at me, tears in his eyes. I told myself you needed to learn a lesson. Then, when you started succeeding, I told myself you didn't need us anymore. Truth is, I couldn't face what I'd done. It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was honest, perhaps the most honest conversation we'd ever had. I'm dying, Samantha, he continued. Maybe not today or tomorrow, but this heart's giving out. Before I go, I need to know. Can you ever forgive me? The question hung between us, loaded with a decade of pain and missed opportunities. I thought carefully before responding. I'm working on it, I said truthfully. But forgiveness doesn't mean there are no consequences. I can help this family, but there will be conditions. Strict ones. He nodded slowly. Whatever you think is fair. After another day of meetings with financial advisors, lawyers, and healthcare providers, I developed a comprehensive plan. I called a family meeting in the hospital conference room, bringing in Zoe via video call for moral support. Scott arrived last, clearly hungover, muttering about having to close the store early. My mother sat beside my father's wheelchair, holding his hand nervously. Heather took the seat next to me, a silent show of support. I've spent the past 2 days assessing the situation. I began, opening a laptop containing my presentation. The store is $273,000 in debt, with monthly losses averaging $8,000. The house has negative equity due to multiple refinances. Dad's medical bills will exceed $150,000 after insurance. And Scott owes $150,000 to people who don't use collection agencies. I let the figures sink in before continuing. I can solve these problems. I have the resources. But this isn't a blank check. There will be conditions. I outlined my proposal. I would pay off all debts, cover medical expenses, and invest in modernizing the store. The family home would be renovated and placed in a protected trust. Scott would enter a gambling addiction treatment program, followed by supervised employment. My parents would retire from active management of the store, which would be restructured under professional guidance. Heather would receive a full scholarship and living expenses to return to her teaching career. As I detailed each point, I watched their reactions. My parents seemed relieved, yet humbled. Heather looked hopeful for the first time since it arrived. Scott's expression darkened with each condition that applied to him. "So we'd be working for you?" he interrupted. "Dancing to your tune for your money? You'd be getting a second chance you haven't earned," I corrected him. "The alternative is bankruptcy, foreclosure, and whatever your creditors in Cleveland have planned." "This is bullshit," Scott exploded. Standing up, "She disappears for 10 years, gets rich, and now wants to control us. Are we really going to let her lord it over us like some kind of savior?" "Scott," my father said wearily. "Sit down." "No. She's always thought she was better than us, and now she's proving it. Poor little Sammy, thrown out in the cold, now back to rescue the failing family." He turned to me, eyes blazing. "We don't need your charity or your conditions." "Actually, you do," I replied calmly. "And what you call charity, I call consequences. Actions have them, Scott. Like forging my signature on loan documents." His face paled. "That was just fraud. A felony. 5 to 10 years if prosecuted." "You wouldn't." I met his gaze steadily. "Try me. I'll tell everyone about how you abandoned your family," he threatened desperately. "How you let us struggle while you got rich. How you—" "Go ahead," I interrupted, pulling out my phone. "I've recorded every conversation since I arrived in Millfield. I'd be happy to share the unedited reality alongside whatever version you create." Scott stormed out, slamming the door behind him. In the silence that followed, my father wheeled himself closer to me. "Hess scared," he said quietly. "We all are." "I know," I acknowledged. "But this plan isn't punishment. It's the only way forward that doesn't end in disaster for everyone." My mother spoke up, her voice small but determined. "We accept your conditions, Samantha. All of them. And thank you." As they left to give me some privacy, my phone buzzed with messages from townspeople who'd heard I was back. News traveled fast in Millfield. The mayor wanted to discuss a tech education program for the high school. My old teachers hoped I might speak to their classes. Former classmates suddenly remembered our close friendship. Sitting alone in that conference room, I realized something important. I'd left Millfield as an outcast, rejected by my own family. I was returning not just as a success story, but as someone with the power to effect real change both for my family and potentially for the town that had shaped me. The choice of how to use that power was entirely mine. The next morning, I arranged for my father to be released from the hospital for a few hours to attend our family meeting at the Hayes hardware store. The building held decades of memories, the worn wooden floors I'd swept as a child, the ancient cash register I'd learned to operate, the back office where I'd first repaired a computer at 14. Now, It would be the setting for my family's reckoning. I arrived early, walking through the eerily quiet aisles. Business was clearly slow. Dust had settled on some of the display models. The computer system, if you could call it that, was a dinosaur from the early 2000s, running software so outdated it could barely connect to credit card processors. My family arrived together, my father in a wheelchair pushed by my mother, Heather walking alongside, and Scott trailing behind, sullen and unshaven. I'd set up chairs in the center of the store, along with a projector connected to my laptop. "Thank you for coming," I began formally. "I've finalized my plan to address the family's situation." I started the presentation, displaying detailed slides of the financial reality. The store had been losing money for years, hidden by creative bookkeeping and increasingly desperate loans. My father's medical needs would require extensive ongoing care. The house needed significant repairs that had been deferred for years, and Scott's debts to the Cleveland loan shark had grown with compounding interest rates that would make a credit card company blush. The total amount needed to resolve all outstanding issues is $627,000, I stated, letting the number hang in the air. It was more than my entire family had earned collectively in the past 5 years. To be clear, I'm prepared to provide these funds. But as I said yesterday, there will be conditions. I outlined the full plan in greater detail. First, the store. Hayes Hardware will be renovated, modernized, and restructured. New inventory systems, e-commerce integration, updated merchandising. Dad and Mom will retire from active management, but remain as consultants. A professional manager will be hired to oversee day-to-day operations. My father nodded reluctantly, understanding this was necessary. Second, the house. It will be fully renovated and placed in a protected trust that prevents it from being used as collateral for future loans. You'll live there rent-free for life, but the equity will be preserved. My mother looked relieved at this. Third, medical care. I'll cover all expenses related to Dad's heart condition, including the surgery, medications, and ongoing care. Fourth, Heather's future. I smiled at my sister. A full scholarship to complete your master's degree in education, plus living expenses so you can focus on your studies without worry. Heather's eyes filled with tears of gratitude. Finally, Scott. I turned to my brother, whose expression remained defiant. Your gambling debts will be paid in full, on the condition that you enter a residential treatment program for addiction, followed by financial counseling. Upon successful completion, you'll be offered a position at the renovated store, under supervision with gradually increasing responsibility based on performance and sobriety milestones. So I'm basically under house arrest? Scott scoffed. Working as a clerk in what used to be our family business? You're being given a chance most people in your position never get. I corrected him. The alternative is bankruptcy, potential criminal charges for fraud, and whatever your creditors in Cleveland have planned for you. This is humiliating, Scott muttered. Scott, please, my mother pleaded. This is more than generous. My father wheeled himself forward. Son, we don't have a choice. And frankly, we don't deserve one after how we treated your sister. Scott's face reddened. So that's it? She wins? She comes back after 10 years and takes over everything because we need her money? This isn't about winning, I said calmly. It's about solving problems you created but can't fix on your own. Well, be a laughingstock, Scott continued bitterly. Everyone in town will know little Sammy had to rescue the family that threw her out. They'll all be laughing at us. They already are, I pointed out. The failing store, the remortgaged house, your gambling. People talk, Scott. And I'll give them more to talk about, he threatened. I'll tell everyone how you abandoned us, how you're only helping now because it makes you look good. I pulled out my phone, setting it on the table. As I mentioned yesterday, I've recorded every conversation since arriving in Millfield. Would you like me to play back what you said in the hospital about forging my signature? Or perhaps your admission about where the third mortgage money really went? Scott's face paled. You wouldn't. I'm not the scared girl you helped throw out anymore, I replied evenly. Test me if you want to find out. Scott grabbed his jacket and stormed toward the door. I don't need this. I don't need any of you. As the bell above the door jangled with his exit, my father buried his face in his hands. "He'll be back when he cools down." "Maybe," I acknowledged. "But my offer has a time limit. The loan sharks don't." My mother looked up, tears streaming down her face. "We were so wrong, Samantha. So terribly wrong." "Yes, you were," I agreed, not sugarcoating the truth. "But this isn't about punishment. It's about fixing what can be fixed and moving forward." Heather squeezed my hand in silent support. My father looked up, his eyes red-rimmed but clear. "I don't deserve your help. None of us do. But I'm grateful for it, and I promise you, we won't waste this chance." Just then, the bell above the door jingled again. I expected to see Scott returning. But instead, several local business owners entered the baker whose website ID built in high school. The florist had hired me to digitize her inventory. Dr. Anderson, whose dental practice had been my first real client. We heard Samantha Hayes was back in town, Mrs. Coleman from the bakery said, smiling warmly. "The girl who made it big in tech." "We always knew you were special, Doctor," Anderson added, though I distinctly remembered him telling me computers were just a fad when I was 16. More townspeople filtered in, eager to reconnect with the local success story. I watched my mother's face as she realized how I was viewed by the community now, not as the rebellious daughter who'd abandoned her family, but as the brilliant entrepreneur who'd overcome adversity to build something remarkable. The contrast between their previous narrative and the town's perception couldn't have been clearer. For years, my parents had told everyone it abandoned them. Now, everyone could see who had really been abandoned. After the impromptu gathering dispersed, my mother approached me hesitantly. Would you have dinner with us tonight? At the house? Just family." I considered declining, but Heather's hopeful expression swayed me. "All right, but without Scott." "Hell come around," my father insisted weakly. "Maybe," I replied, "but my conditions aren't negotiable." That evening, I arrived at my childhood home for the first time in a decade. The Christmas tree in the corner was the same artificial one from my youth. Though many of the ornaments had broken over the years, the furniture was more worn, the carpets more faded, but the smell of my mother's pot roast, my favorite as a child, filled the air just as it always had. We ate at the same dining table where my future had been decided 10 years earlier. The conversation was awkward at first, filled with careful small talk about safe topics. But as the meal progressed, something shifted. My father began asking genuine questions about my company, my work. My mother brought out old photos, including some I'd never seen of my college graduation that Mrs. Wilson had shared with her. Heather spoke excitedly about the graduate programs she was considering. For the first time in memory, we had a family dinner without arguing, without judgment, without my father's domineering presence shutting down any path but his own. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a beginning. As I was leaving, my father asked to speak with me privately on the porch, the same porch I'd walked away from in tears a decade earlier. "I've been thinking about what you said," he began, his breath visible in the cold December air. "About consequences. You're right. I never faced any for what I did to you. I just kept telling myself I was right until I almost believed it." He looked up at me, his eyes clearer than I'd seen them in years. "I failed you as a father. I was supposed to support your dreams, not crush them, because they were different from mine. I'm sorry, Samantha, truly sorry." It was the real apology. I'd been waiting for acknowledgement not just of the action but of the underlying failure. I didn't respond immediately, letting his words settle between us in the cold night air. "I'm not asking you to forgive me," he continued. "I haven't earned that, but I want you to know that I see now what I couldn't see then. You were always the strongest of us all." I nodded, accepting his words without promising more than I could give. "Good night, Dad. I'll have the lawyers start the paperwork tomorrow." As I drove back to my hotel, I realized something important. I hadn't returned to Millfield seeking revenge or vindication. I'd come back to face my past and find closure. What I found instead was the possibility, just the possibility, of a different kind of future. 6 months after my Christmas homecoming, Hayes Hardware celebrated its grand reopening. The transformation was remarkable: modern displays, computerized inventory systems, a sleek website offering both local delivery and nationwide shipping of specialty items. The store's focus had shifted to high-quality tools and expert advice, carving out a niche that big-box stores couldn't fill. My father, looking healthier after his successful surgery and cardiac rehabilitation, greeted customers from a comfortable chair near the entrance. No longer responsible for day-to-day operations, Head found a new role as the store's historian and master advisor, sharing decades of hardware knowledge with appreciative customers. My mother had discovered unexpected talents in retirement. Shed started a community garden behind the store, teaching neighborhood children about plants and tools. The anxiety that had characterized her for as long as I could remember had faded, replaced by a gentle confidence I'd never seen in her before. Heather was thriving in her master's program, already being recruited by several prestigious school districts. She visited Millfield regularly but was building her own life on her own terms, something I was immensely proud to see. Scott's journey had been the most challenging. After a tense standoff with his creditors resolved only by my direct intervention and payment, Head reluctantly entered treatment. The first month, Head called our parents daily, threatening to leave. By the third month, something had shifted. His counselor reported genuine progress in addressing not just the gambling, but the underlying issues of inadequacy and resentment that had fueled his addiction. Had been working at the store under supervision for 2 months now. Our relationship remained strained, but the open hostility had been replaced by an awkward truce. Last week, Head actually asked my advice about the store's inventory system. A small step, but significant. As for me, I'd purchased a vacation home outside Millfield, close enough for regular visits but far enough to maintain healthy boundaries. Shield Tech continued to thrive under Zoe's day-to-day leadership, allowing me to split my time between Seattle and Ohio as needed. It also established a technology center in downtown Millfield, providing free computer training for residents and a high-speed internet hub for local businesses. The Hayes Technology Scholarship now sent 2 promising students to college each year, with preference given to those interested in both technology and small business applications. That Christmas, exactly 1 year after my return, we gathered at my parents' renovated home. The atmosphere was tentatively festive, everyone still learning how to be a family again. My father had insisted on getting a real tree for the first time in 30 years, and my mother had unearthed ornaments I'd made as a child, preserved despite everything that had happened. Scott arrived last, bringing his counselor Jason as moral support. Head prepared a formal amends as part of his recovery program, reading from note cards with shaking hands. "I was jealous of you," he admitted, looking directly at me for perhaps the first time in our adult lives. "You were smart in ways I couldn't understand, and I resented it. I helped push you out because I thought I'd finally get all of Dad's attention. Then I spent 10 years trying to prove I deserved it, failing miserably, and blaming everyone but myself." It wasn't a perfect reconciliation, those exist only in movies, but it was honest. And honesty was the foundation we needed to build upon. After dinner, my father asked me to help him fetch dessert from the kitchen, a transparent excuse for a private conversation. "I found something," he said, pulling a dusty box from atop the refrigerator. "I thought you might want it." Inside was a collection of newspaper clippings, printouts, and magazine articles, a chronicle of my professional journey that I hadn't realized anyone had been keeping. "Your mother started it," he explained. "After you left. She'd cut out anything with your name, hide it from me. Eventually, I found her scrapbook, and instead of being angry, I started adding to it myself." He looked away, embarrassed. "It was the only way I could follow your life without admitting I was wrong." The box contained something else, a stack of unopened envelopes. My letters, birthday cards, and Christmas cards. Sent faithfully year after year despite the silence. All unopened, but all kept. "I couldn't bring myself to read them," he admitted. "But I couldn't throw them away either." It was perhaps the most honest glimpse into my father's complicated emotions I'd ever received, his pride and stubbornness warring with his love and regret, neither fully winning for all those years. Later that evening, as we sat around the fireplace exchanging modest gifts, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. 10 years ago, I'd been thrown out with nothing but determination and dreams. It built a successful company, achieved financial security beyond anything my family could imagine, and returned not as a supplicant but as a savior. But the true measure of success wasn't the money or the accolades, or even the power to rescue my family from their mistakes. It was the ability to face my past without being controlled by it, to offer help without expecting gratitude, to set boundaries without seeking revenge. As Heather raised a toast to family lost and found, I thought about all the people who had become my chosen family over the years. Zoe, my brilliant partner who'd believed in me from the start. Professor Jackson, who'd seen potential when no one else did. Mrs. Wilson, who'd offered shelter on the worst night of my life. Dr. Rivera, who'd helped me process my pain without being defined by it. My journey hadn't been about proving my worth to the family that rejected me. It had been about discovering my own worth, independent of their approval or validation. The following spring, my father and I started working together on a community project renovating the town library's computer lab. It was the first time we'd ever collaborated as equals, and while there were occasional tensions, there was also a growing mutual respect. "You know," he said one afternoon as we installed new workstations, "I spent most of my life thinking success meant following in my father's footsteps, doing exactly what he did. I tried to force you and Scott into that same box." He paused, connecting cables with hands that were steadier than they'd been in years. But real legacy isn't about making carbon copies of yourself. It's about giving your children strong enough roots to grow and wings strong enough to fly their own path. He looked up at me, his eyes clear and present. "You built your wings yourself, after I tried to clip them. I'm sorry for that. But I'm proud of who you've become not because of me, but despite me." It wasn't a perfect healing of all old wounds. Some scars would always remain. But as we worked side by side in comfortable silence, I realized we'd found something I'd never thought possible, not just reconciliation, but a new relationship built on who we were now, not who we'd been then. 10 years ago, I was kicked out with nothing but my dreams and determination. Today, I've built not just a $68 million company, but something far more valuable, a life where success is measured not by wealth, but by the courage to forgive without forgetting, to help without enabling, and to rebuild what once seemed broken beyond repair. Have you ever had to rebuild a relationship that seemed permanently damaged? What did it take to move forward? Share your experiences in the comments, and if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that sometimes. The darkest moments can lead to unexpected light. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and remember, your worth isn't determined by those who couldn't see your potential, but by your courage to believe in it yourself.